Thank you. The next item of business is portfolio questions. Firstly, on the rural economy, usual mantra, short questions, snappy answers. Everybody gets their questions in. We all go home happy. Question 1, Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to encourage women into agriculture.
Minister Mary Goujon.
I was delighted to see the publication of the final report of the Women in Agriculture Task Force in November last year. The Task Force recommendations will deliver the change that we need to ensure equal opportunities and to encourage more women into agriculture. Not only is it the right thing to do, it's critical to building the resilience of agricultural businesses who are facing a post-Brexit future. Implementation work on that has already begun. We're piloting unconscious bias training for agricultural organisations, and we're also offering training to women in agriculture to develop their skills and leadership abilities.
Sandra White.
Thank you, Minister, very much for that reply, and certainly changing culture and practice is something which definitely has to be looked at. Can I ask the Minister how the report will contribute to that, to changing culture, practice and the law, also to ensure that significant contribution made by women in farming and food production is properly supported, developed and acknowledged?
Thank you. Minister.
Changing culture and practice is one of the core conclusions and recommendations that was made in the report. And the key recommendations that are in that to try and achieve that include the development and application of an equality charter for Scottish agriculture, which will be urging industry organisations and businesses to make their training and structures more accessible to women, and as well as undertaking more early planning for succession and calling on equipment manufacturers to make equipment that will really improve women's safety. And the Scottish Government remains committed to supporting implementation of the report's recommendations in their entirety.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Minister, we need to encourage more young women into agriculture, yet they face significant barriers, as we've discussed, such as accessing reliable childcare and grant support. Can I ask the Minister, will the Scottish Government reverse the absolutely absurd decision it made in 2018 to cease the funding for the new entrance scheme and provide a more financial support for young female farmers so that Scottish agriculture can have a more sustainable and positive future?
Minister.
I would say that the scheme that we had were one of the only ones that existed across the whole of the UK. Now, we absolutely identify how important this is, and it was an issue that was raised through the task force. But as the Cabinet Secretary said in his statement, when he made the statement about the task force and the recommendations from them, that any future recommendations on the new entrance scheme, that's going to be considered as part of the Food and Farming Production Group. But I would also add to that as well, we also have the land matching service, which was launched last year too, and we hope that we see that will become a success and will operate well, but we'll continue to monitor that as it continues.
Question 2, Tom Arthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports forestry in the Renfrewshire South constituency.
Cabinet Secretary Fergus Hugh.
Presiding Officer, there are more than 2,000 hectares of woodland in Renfrewshire South, representing just over 12% of the constituency area. Through our agency, Scottish Forestry, we provide grants for tree planting and the sustainable management of woodlands across Scotland. In Renfrewshire South, we have provided over £2.7 million of support for 22 forestry projects in the last 5 years, including 17 new woodlands totalling 334 hectares.
Tom Arthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that detailed answer? Can he outline what role the Scottish Government believes the forestry sector can play in achieving the outcomes within the National Performance Framework?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the forestry sector plays a key, indeed, Presiding Officer, a unique role in supporting our national outcomes relating to both climate change and economic growth. It supports around 25,000 jobs, and it contributes over £1,000 million a year to the economy. It also helps to support the population of our rural areas and to fight climate change by removing the equivalent of almost 10 million tonnes of carbon dioxide per year from the atmosphere. But the contribution doesn't end just there, however. As set out in the Scotland's Forestry Strategy, which we published in 2019, forestry also contributes to national performance outcomes on health, on well-being, on communities, on education, biodiversity and industry. And indeed, and I'll conclude with this, Presiding Officer. The most recent figures showed that our support for the sector allowed Scotland to create no less than 84% of all the new woodland in the UK, deliver 66% of the UK's softwood timber harvest, and meet our biodiversity commitments for planting native species.
Colin Smith, briefly, please.
Thank you, President Officer. Key to supporting forestry is ensuring necessary infrastructure is in place. And given the impact of rising levels of timber transport and small rural routes, will the Cabinet Secretary seek to expand funding for the Timber Transport Fund and consider increasing the government intervention level to above 50%, given the budget pressures on local councils who currently have to find the other 50% to match investment?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Mr Smith does raise a very important point, and I'm delighted to inform him, if he's not already aware, that I've already done what he's asked. In fact, I've done what he's asked for the last 3 years. We have substantially increased the funding for the Timber Transport Fund, and the reasons for that are that we saw that it was necessary to help the sector, to help improve our economic and environmental performance, to unjam bottlenecks, and to work with in collaboration with local authorities. And I know that they very much welcome the work that we've done on timber transport. It has been a terrific success story in Scotland, and I'm extremely grateful to all the groups throughout Scotland that work hard in identifying which candidates are the right ones for qualifying for support from this fund. I think local authorities are reasonably happy with the arrangements that they have, whereby they do receive very substantial support to supplement their own efforts. But of course, Presiding Officer, we will keep this under review.
Question 3, Jeremy Balfour.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Rural Economy Secretary has had with the Finance Secretary regarding how much will be allocated to farmers in the next budget.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work and I work very closely. We have discussed our concerns that the UK Government has not provided any meaningful long-term statement about replacing EU Common Agricultural Policy funding. Presiding Officer, I have repeatedly over the past 3 years pressed the UK Government, notably Michael Gove, to honour their pledge made during the Brexit referendum to at least match EU funding post-Brexit. Now, after 3 years of this persistent questioning by me, they have belatedly confirmed funding for direct payments for 2020. However, there remains serious gaps in their assurances, including on the impact of exchange rates, and crucially, there's no certainty for funding for farmers or indeed foresters, land managers, leader projects or wider rural businesses beyond 2020.
Jeremy Balfour.
With respect to the Cabinet Secretary, the UK Government has guaranteed to match the current annual budget available to farmers every year until 2024, starting with £472 million in financial support to farmers in Scotland over the next 2 years. The SNP Government have left Scottish farmers in the dark by failing to publish a new Common Agricultural Policy and financial distribution in the agriculture sector post-Brexit. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm work on this is underway, and when will it be published?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm not sure whether Mr Balfour has actually read the letter from Rishi Sunak, the Chief Secretary to Treasury, to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance. I have it in front of me here. I can tell you it doesn't say what you've said it says. It doesn't contain the categoric assurances that you have said it provides. It goes some way to do that, and I'm pleased that after 3 years of my questioning Michael Gove face-to-face in umpteen meetings of the ministerial group, probably questioning him more frequently and persistently in this question than anyone else, I'm pleased that at long last there's a belated reply, although why it took 3 years, it remains a mystery. But there is still no assurance beyond this year on the specific funding that will be received. There is no certainty about the exchange rate issue, and there is residual doubt about whether the assurances apply beyond farmers. The reference to assurances is to farmers. Foresters are not necessarily farmers. In fact, most of them aren't farmers. Leader is not farming. Why don't they specifically mention all those who receive the rural funding? And if you want to make categoric statements of a sweeping nature, could I respectfully suggest to the member you get your facts right first?
Gail Ross, it must be brief, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the news that the Elfast loan payments have begun. Can the Cabinet Secretary update Parliament on the value of the funding of those payments provided to farmers and crofters this winter already? And is there still time for people to apply for a loan payment?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm speaking from memory, Presiding Officer, but I think the funding thus far provided is just over 38 million by way of Elfast loan funding, and that in the first tranche, 7,595 farmers and crofters have received loans to the tune of 95% of entitlement. I believe that the payments have been made slightly earlier than last year, on average around about 10 days. I think that support has been greatly welcomed by farmers and crofters throughout the country, particularly in the light of the huge remaining uncertainties about Brexit, about the import of cheap meats from other countries, about the possibility of tariffs on sheep meat, 88% of which exports of which go to the EU. So this is welcome funding to a vital part of our rural community, namely hill farmers and farmers in challenging land. And I was delighted as the Cabinet Secretary to take the decision to get that money out as soon as possible. This is extremely important, and I'm very pleased and grateful to Ian Carmichael and his team of officials who have so efficiently delivered this. And finally, I would recommend that any person who's already received the offers of Elfast loans, and there are over 10,000 in total who have, should return them if they haven't already done so, so that we can get on with paying the remaining balance of payments.
I'd like to move along, get as many questions in as possible. I appreciate the answers and the questions, but please, let's move along. Question 4, Stuart Stevenson.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the potential impact on the forestry sector of increased fire hazard due to long-term environmental changes.
Minister.
The Scottish Government's Resilience Division is working with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service to include an updated assessment of wildfire risk in the second iteration of the Scottish Risk Assessment. Wildfires include grassland, moorland and forest fires, and the new assessment will be available to responders in spring this year. In addition, the programme for government makes clear that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service will develop a wildfire strategy to ensure that we can respond to the increased risks of wildfire, including forest fires.
Stuart Stevenson.
The number of wildfires in Scotland over the last year that we've reported quadrupled, albeit they're not at Australia's level. Is it appropriate to consider the wider effects on communities from wildfires, and perhaps in particular how Muirburn is one of the smallish contributors to that?
Minister. Absolutely, and I know that we know that as our climate changes, we are seeing more extreme weather events, and I'm sure that everyone in this chamber has watched on in horror the events unfolding in Australia and the massive impact that that's had on their landscape, their wildlife, and the sheer human cost of what's happening there, as well as the human effort to try and tackle that. I think Stuart Stevenson is quite right to point that out, as well as the impact that we've seen here in Scotland as a result of that. We saw wildfires in Moray in April last year, as well as in Sutherland in May, and that was a fire that burned for 6 days. We have to do everything that we can to prepare for these challenges, and that's why the Fire Service is developing that wildfire strategy along with partner agencies to ensure that we can fight wildfires and try to prevent these fires happening in the first place and minimise the damage caused if they do occur.
Question 5, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to address the problems that farmers encounter with the inclusion of FAME in red diesel.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the serious financial and safety issues which Scottish farmers have faced in recent months with this fuel are simply unacceptable. My officials are in close communication with the DFT, with the National Farmers Union of Scotland and Petro Ineos as work to fully understand and mitigate the issues progresses. With fuel legislation reserved to the UK Government, Scottish ministers and I should say that Michael Matheson has the lead role in this particular area, have written to the UK Transport Secretary pressing for urgent action on dealing with stockpiles of affected fuel, as well as on longer-term solutions allowing continued carbon reduction. As the UK Government have not yet responded, Ministers are writing again this week, stressing the urgency of the matter.
Liz Smith.
Could I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that helpful answer? As he rightly points out, there have been some stockpiles of contaminated fuel, and this is obviously a major concern should we get a period of very cold weather. Could I just pick him up on his reply just now? Is the government looking at compensating those farmers that did stockpile that fuel, unknown to them that it was actually contaminated?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I appreciate that Liz Smith understands this is a very serious issue, the cold weather coming along, the fuel being used for vehicles which is necessary to transport that feed to animals, to sheep in particular, up on the hill. If they can't use the vehicles, they can't feed the animals. The animal welfare risks are therefore foreseeable to us all. And I thought I would just state that because I think it kind of illustrates just the plight that farmers face. And I think Liz Smith is aware of it, but I hope it's in order to point it out, Presiding Officer. Any question of financial compensation to those affected or dealing with affected fuel already in tanks are commercial matters for the sellers and distributors of fuel to address. The UK Government is responsible for this matter in terms that it is a reserved function. Mr Matheson, who, as I said earlier, is the lead minister in this, has been in contact with, as his officials, with the DFT, trying to find a solution. I think with respect, you know, rather than have an argument now about compensation, I think the real need is to try to get a solution. That is what farmers want. They want a solution. It's a complex issue, there's no question about that. But I think that the UK DFT can play a role, for example, by coordinating accelerated testing to identify the root cause of the filter blocking issue. That's just one. I know I shouldn't go on, Presiding Officer, so I always try to be as brief as I possibly can. So that said, I do very much hope that the UK Government accepts its responsibilities, and I did specifically raise this is the last thing I'll say, with George Eustace on Monday in a bilateral I had after the IMG meeting, just to stress just how important this is. So the UK Government will, I hope, take heed of the question from Liz Smith, my answer, and very swiftly try to find a solution. Otherwise, the animal welfare consequences could be very serious.
Question 6, Emma Harper.
To ask the Scottish Government what the impact could be on meat products imported to Scotland as part of a future UK trade deal if the reported plans by the USDA in the USA to introduce a system of self-regulation and policing in US slaughterhouses.
Well, you must do the question as it's on the business bulletin. I think there's a couple of words slipped in there that not in my print anyway. US, not there, and mine US policing. But anyway, just say that. Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah. Slipping in words is more for ministers, not Presiding Officer. But in any event, seriously, the Scottish Government is extremely concerned that any proposed free trade deal might undermine our high-quality regulatory standards. I raised this with UK ministers this week when we met to make clear just how important it will be for these standards to be maintained in future trade deals. I made clear that this government will resist vigorously any attempts to undermine current standards.
Emma Harper, briefly, please.
Scotland is known for worldwide products of provenance, quality and excellent standards of animal welfare. Does the Cabinet Secretary therefore agree with me that the potential self-policing in the US slaughterhouses poses a safety concern and risk to Scottish products by providing consumers with cheaper products of substandard quality?
Cabinet Secretary, briefly, if you can.
Well, yes, I do agree. And I think this is an issue that is of great concern around the country with our beef sector, with beef farmers, producers and with slaughterhouses. Because we do, in Scotland, produce meat to the highest standards. And if we're to import meat from other countries in the Americas broadly that do not have the same standards of provenance, of animal hygiene, of official veterinary supervision and CCTV checking of the processes at abattoirs, if we don't have those standards, the consumers don't know what they're getting, quite frankly, and this is of huge concern. And if these imports are flooding the market, cheap imports from countries that don't observe our high standards, then this could well undermine the meat sector in Scotland. And therefore, this is one of the most important Brexit issues which must be resolved. It hasn't yet been resolved. I noticed that certain assurances have been given by Theresa Villiers when she spoke at the Oxford Farming Conference. Time doesn't permit me to read it all out or go into it all. Suffice to say that I think there is real concern and very serious misgivings about whether there is a real commitment across the whole of the UK government to follow through other and some particular fears that in some dodgy deal with the USA, the standards will be dropped and we will see the market in the UK have introduced animals that have not been bred, reared and slaughtered in accordance with those standards. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have responded, albeit briefly, to this question.
I don't know about briefly because I can't get Maurice Corrie and Graham Simpson in, but I do appreciate this is a very detailed area. I apologise to members who also wanted supplementaries. Not possible when we're so tight in time. I'm moving straight on to questions on transport, infrastructure and connectivity. Question 1, Rachel Hamilton.
To ask the Scottish Government when new rolling stock will be in operation on the Borders Railway.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Since December 2018, we've added over 30,000 seats on the Borders Railway. 2 services have been strengthened between Tweedbank and South Gyle with extra carriages, adding around an additional 1,500 seats daily. The addition of further carriages has been delayed by the poor performance of Angel Trains and Wabtec in delivering our investment in additional refurbished HST carriages. I continue to press those involved to ensure a strong focus on completing the refurbishment programme, enabling more carriages and more seats for Borders passengers to enjoy the full benefits of our investment, as well as continuing to improve performance.
Rachel Hamilton.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer and confirming the delays with Angel Trains and Wabtec. However, the recent decision to terminate the ScotRail franchise early will certainly create uncertainty, and this could affect the investment in rolling stock. Currently, the Class 158 trains that run on the Borders Railway are not sufficient for passengers. According to the latest Squire figures, which measure the quality of trains, it's clear improvement is needed as the Class 158 trains are failing to meet in 10 out of the 17 benchmarks, and this is unacceptable. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to tell us today, will the early termination of the franchise directly affect investment pledges, and will passengers on the Borders Rail actually get their new rolling stock that they need and they want it? Thank you.
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
The answer to our first question is no, because the franchise agreement remains in place for the following 2 years, and the investment that we've committed to making through the franchise remains in place. So there will be a continued investment in rail infrastructure and rolling stock in Scotland. And to the second question, as I outlined in my initial answer, the delay to the cascade of further carriages into the Borders Railway has been disrupted as a result of the poor performance of Angel Trains and also Wabtec in carrying out the refurbishment programme of HSTs. I visited Wabtec's site in Kilmarnock fairly recently, met with the senior executive, including the Vice President of the company, again to impress on them the need to make further progress with this issue, which they've given a commitment to do, and we'll continue to make sure that they hold to that and to get the work completed as quickly as possible.
A supplementary, Mark Ruskell, about the Borders, the Borders Railway.
That'll do. Figures released this week show that the number of rail journeys in Fife fell by 2% last year.
No, it's the Borders Railway. It's a supplementary to the Borders Railway.
Rolling stock?
No. Sit down, please.
Okay.
Question 2, Lewis MacDonald.
Can I reframe it?
No, you can't. You should have thought of that. Question 2, Lewis MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made in resolving the outstanding issues in relation to the AWPR.
Cabinet Secretary.
As I advised the REC Committee in December, following lengthy discussions, Transport Scotland agreed a commercial settlement in principle with Aberdeen Roads Limited. This settlement recognises that ARL faced significant challenges, including adverse weather and the collapse of Carillion Construction Limited in delivering a complex and challenging project. It also recognises the significant risk, cost and uncertainty attached to lengthy court proceedings. The terms of this settlement are currently being finalised. However, it will include a payment of £65 million to ARL, which is largely offset by the £53 million saving in payments made to date.
Lewis MacDonald.
you very much, and I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for confirming the reports that were given to the stock market just before Christmas. In relation to other outstanding issues, I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary could comment the road safety risks and congestion at Kingswell South Roundabout are ones that have been highlighted more or less since the day traffic began to run along that section. I'm pleased Transport Scotland have now made a commitment to take action on that, and also the contract for signage to be let by Aberdeen City Council. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary, in relation to Kingswell South in particular,
please,
can indicate a timetable within which these works will be done.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the issue and concern which a member has raised, as other members have raised in this chamber before, including the member himself. I can't give him a specific time frame at the present moment, but what I will do is I'll endeavour to come back to the member with more detail on that if it would be helpful to him and his constituents.
Mike Rumbles.
On the 5th of December 2018, the Cabinet Secretary said in committee, if there is any additional cost over and above the fixed price contract, Parliament will be notified. So why did the Presiding Officer, why did the Cabinet Secretary wait until the recess to announce the extra cost? When did he know, and when did he agree the extra cost? What date? And why didn't he inform Parliament at that time?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Parliament was informed through the REC Committee as soon as an agreement had been reached, and the reason for that was because of the requirement for Guildford Try to be who had to notify the stock market of the agreement, and that's what compressed the timetable, and that's why, as soon as a settlement had been agreed, we notified Parliament through the REC Committee.
Question 3, Maureen Watt.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the 30 million Link Road project at the Hardigan roundabout in Aberdeen.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, construction work is well underway on the A92, A96 Hardigan Improvement Project, and the main works contractor has already made significant progress on critical earthworks and utility diversions. The project is expected to open in spring 2021, subject to any unforeseen circumstances, such as exceptional adverse weather.
Maureen Watt.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I was disappointed but not surprised to see another North East member, Liam Kerr, trying to score political points in the local press about police incidents at the Hardigan. Mr Kerr and his Westminster colleague have this week been called out by local campaigners in Lawrencekirk for trying to do likewise at the flyover that they've spent years campaigning for. Does the Minister agree with me that rather than obsess over petty point scoring, the Tories should instead welcome investment in North East roads, including the AWPR, that continued to be delivered by this SNP government?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, this government has already committed over £800 million of investment in road infrastructure projects in the north east of Scotland, and we've seen the very substantial benefits that are already being provided through the AWPR and the benefits which that is bringing. But we won't stop there. As the member made reference to, the Hardigan Junction work is moving on at pace, and we expect to see that project continuing to be developed and to see the improvements that provides to traffic flow and also to journey times once it is completed. The draft orders were also published for the new grade-separated junction at Lawrencekirk, which are now out to public consultation in order for the local community to have their opportunity to express their views on the proposed works at that particular site, which again would see an investment of a significant level within that area of the North East. But of course, Presiding Officer, this also sits alongside our plans for the dualling of the A96 between Aberdeen and Inverness, which is a £3 billion major infrastructure project in order to improve connectivity in the north east of Scotland through into Inverness. So while the Tories want to cap from the sidelines, we will get on with doing the day job.
Liam Kerr.
This link road is a good scheme, and the accident stats that I was asked to comment on were not of my making, I can assure Maureen Watt. But taxpayers will want to know the costs, Presiding Officer. At the start, the government said 14 million.
No, briefly.
It was 18 million in 2016. 2019, 30 million. Transport Scotland said last week 49.5 million. Can the Cabinet Secretary comment here and now that this will not rise again?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I presume the member is referring to the Hardigan Roundabout project. The cost for the Hardigan Roundabout project are £49.5 million, which include all of the wider aspects of the project itself. For example, purchasing of land, public utility diversions, advisory fees, preliminary works, etc., geotechnical work and environmental surveys. So that's the overall cost of the project. But what I can say to the member, as ever, it never comes as a surprise to me that the Tories want to talk down Scotland and improvements that are being made in Scotland, just like the very one which my colleague Maureen Watt has made reference to.
Question 4, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the progress being made to resolve the reported long-standing and escalating traffic flow issues at the Belfield interchange in Kilmarnock.
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, the difficulties faced by traffic using Belfield has been identified as part of the second Strategic Transport Projects Review. STPR2 will identify the transport investment priorities for the next 20 years. To help deliver the new National Transport Strategy, it will take an aspect in how we prioritise our funding in these areas. This includes the strategic transport network, such as the trunk road around Kilmarnock. STPR2 will be concluded in early 2021.
Willie Coffey.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. He'll be aware that the Belfield interchange has been named in the top 3 of the most dangerous roundabouts in Scotland, with various studies in recent years failing to come up with a technical solution. Can the Cabinet Secretary give me some hope that this problem can be examined afresh to identify whatever solution is required to manage traffic flows effectively and help reduce the dangers for my constituents who use it?
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, there's several measures which have been undertaken on this particular junction over recent years in order to address safety issues, and the most recent annual road safety review did not highlight a specific problem on the Belfield interchange at the present moment. However, it is recognised that there are congestion points at this particular interchange at peak times, which is why it will be considered within the STPR2 process as to whether further measures need to be undertaken in order to address the congestion issues that can occur at the Belfield interchange. I'm also conscious of some of the plans which the local authority have for further industrial development and commercial development in that area, all of which would have to be taken into account in any measures which were introduced in order to address some of the issues associated with this particular interchange.
Question 5, Joan McAlpine.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the UK Government regarding the performance of the rail services in the South Scotland region that are regulated by the Department of Transport.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government last met with the Department of Transport on the 5th of November 2019. Part of this discussion included the performance of cross-border rail services. The Scottish Government also maintains a regular dialogue with all cross-border operators.
Joan McAlpine.
Thank you. Lockerbie Station is the worst in Scotland and the 5th worst in the UK, according to a recent survey. Yet all the services running through it are regulated by the UK Government, including TransPennine Express, which has cancelled its mid-morning service from Lockerbie, even though the trains run through the town, which means there are no longer any off-peak tickets to be had in the morning. Also, journeys from Lockerbie can no longer be reserved. This is a lifeline service for the people of Dumfries and Galloway. And does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the UK Government really needs to get its finger out and take action against these operators?
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, I am aware of the recent punctuality and cancellation issues related to the TransPennine Express. I understand that performance of what is a UK Government train operator franchise has been affected by the introduction of new rolling stock and a shortage of train crew to operate the new rolling stock. I do regret the fact that TransPennine Express have amended their December timetable in order to reduce services, which has an impact on rail connectivity in and out of Scotland. 2 TransPennine Expresses were removed from the service in the December 2019 timetable due to changes which I understand are due to constraints on capacity matters. I am told, though, that TransPennine Express is working with the rail industry to reinstate these 2 services in the May 2020 timetable change. However, as yet, that has not been fully confirmed. But I would certainly wish to call upon the Transport Secretary within the UK Government to look at restoring these services as quickly as possible and to address what is an ongoing concern about punctuality and cancellations relating to this particular service.
Question 6, Rhoda Grant.
to ask the Scottish Government when it expects to be able to proceed with the R100 procurement for the North area in light of the legal challenge from GigaClear Limited.
Minister Paul Wheelhouse.
Until legal proceedings have concluded, we are suspended from signing a contract for the North lot. Timescales for contract signature will therefore depend on the length and outcome of the proceedings, and I will update Parliament at that time. The timing of the proceedings is rightly a matter for the court to determine, taking into account its other business. In the meantime, we will provide additional support to ensure that everyone can access superfast broadband services by the end of 2021, delivered through a national demand-led voucher scheme funded by the Scottish Government. Anyone who will not be able to access superfast broadband by the end of 2021, regardless of whether or not billed through the R100 contracts will ultimately reach them, will also be eligible for that voucher scheme.
Rhoda Grant.
I thank the Minister for that response, because people in the North were promised access to superfast broadband at the end of next year, and community solutions were ended, and so has connected communities in the Western Isles been ended, leaving 500 of their customers in limbo. He talks about a voucher scheme. Can that be used collectively? Because everybody knows that it's the most hard to reach communities that are left behind, and if they can't use their voucher schemes collectively, then they won't be able to access superfast broadband at all.
Minister.
Well, certainly, Rhoda Grant raises a very important point. I am aware of examples where communities have been looking to use existing UK government voucher schemes, and it has proved very difficult, as she rightly identifies. So we need to learn lessons from that. We are in the process of developing the voucher scheme, obviously getting clearance for that. We have, I think, outlined last Thursday in the statement to Parliament, outlined that we propose to use the existing mechanism that's used for one of the UK government voucher schemes to be able to provide the funding for the customer to be able to use their voucher. But we can certainly look at issues of how we promote the use of the voucher schemes locally in communities to ensure that we try and aggregate demand and make sure projects happen more effectively and efficiently, and certainly look to engage with members about how we do that.
Question 7, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how the development of ongoing road infrastructure projects take environmental issues into account.
Cabinet Secretary.
The consideration of environmental issues are critical to all road projects. In line with relevant legislation, Transport Scotland undertakes significant environmental assessment work and consultation with key stakeholders, including SEPA, SNH and the Scottish and Historic Environment Scotland, during the design process, culminating in the publication of an environmental impact assessment report. If required, a public local inquiry will be held to consider objections received before a decision is made on whether to proceed with the project. During the construction phase, obligations are placed on the contractor to comply with environmental legislation and commitments, including mitigation identified during the design process.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Roads can play an important part in environmentally balanced infrastructure. However, the Scottish Greens have been demanding that the SNP government terminate all new road projects. The car park tax showed us the Greens' price. So can the Cabinet Secretary assure this chamber that the SNP will not sell out to those who rely on improved roads maintenance to the Greens?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as I've made clear on a number of occasions in recent weeks and in recent months, is that we remain committed to major road investment projects such as the A9 and the A96 alongside road improvements. That's not to say that we don't also recognise the significant climate change challenge which we face, and the need to make sure that we take appropriate measures in order to ensure that we reach a zero carbon economy. That involves us looking at investments that have to be made in low carbon technologies, looking at helping to encourage people to use alternative modes of transport to reduce their reliance on car journeys where possible, but at the same time also making sure we balance that with getting the right type of infrastructure investment that's necessary to support our economy and our communities. And that's the approach that we'll be taking as a government, taking seriously our climate change obligations, while at the same time making sure we make the right type of strategic infrastructure investments to help to support our economy and our communities.
And just squeeze you in, Murdo Fraser, number 8.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with potential buyers for the ScotRail franchise.
Cabinet Secretary.
Neither the Scottish Government nor Transport Scotland have had discussions with potential buyers for the ScotRail franchise. We remain committed to working with Abellio ScotRail to deliver continuous improvements and high-performance services until the end of the current contract, expected to be in March 2022. Work is already underway to examine the post-2022 options open to Scottish ministers. However, this will be subject to the outcome from the UK's White Paper, which we expected in autumn last year.
Murdo Fraser, very briefly.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response? Given the Scottish Government's track record in taking over private companies such as Ferguson Marine, Bifab and Prestwick Airport is less than an encouraging one, what confidence could we have that a public sector bid for ScotRail would be any more successful?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Presiding Officer, as it stands at the present moment, legally the only option we have for rail services in Scotland is to franchise them. We have no other option other than what the existing legislation provides us for at the present time. What we do wish to see is a range of options. That's why we are awaiting the outcome of the Williams review in order to see what approach the UK Government intend to take. I've already made it clear, I don't think that franchising in its present form is fit for purpose, serves the public well, and if you look at the number of franchises which are in serious financial difficulty in England, you can see the real systemic problems there are with rail franchising. For example, the number of services which the UK Government have had to take into operator of last resort because of the failure of franchising within rail services in England. I prefer us to address a much more effective means by structuring our rail services here in Scotland, and I believe the most effective way to do that is to have one single organisation that is responsible for both the rolling stock, the provision of passenger services and the infrastructure on which they are dependent. And in doing that, we can get a much more joined-up approach to how rail services are delivered in Scotland, with a focus on ensuring they deliver the best services for communities and the travelling public.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions. We'll have a very brief pause before we move on to the next item of business.